impact of migration is a very sensitive subject now in economics and in politics. I think you have to rethink what's happening. When globalization took off, and you have a liberalization, and you have a globalization of labor markets, where capital can move wherever it wishes, the new technologies and capital mobility means that any change in costs, relative costs in Britain or China or the United States, a firm can easily relocate. So I don't think it's the existence of the number of migrants. It's the fact is that if labor costs are lower in China, as they are, and productivity is rising faster in China as it has been, then obviously you're going to see a relocation of employment and a redivision of labor. And I think too much attention has been given to actual migrants rather than the fact that we have a globalizing system. And there's one statistic which every labor economist should bear in mind. In the last 25 years or thereabouts, the world's labor supply, the supply of labor to the global economy, has quadrupled. And all of those extra several billion people are coming from economies where the average living standards are a fraction of what they are in Britain, so they put downward pressure on wages everywhere.
I would like to mention a comment by Bernie Sanders, who recently argued that the United States is not ready to discuss universal basic income, although he agrees that it could be a solution. He prefers to focus on raising the minimum wage, which he sees as a first step in the United States. Do you think that it could be a good strategy, an effective strategy?
I think Bernie Sanders should make up his mind where he stands. Last year in the presidential campaign, he came out and said he was in favor of basic income. I'm worried that he's drifted backwards into an industrial strategy. We don't have an industrial manufacturing economy these days. We have a service-oriented tertiary economy. A minimum wage was a very appropriate instrument when you had a male-dominated full-time labor situation, but where people were mainly working on fixed workplaces from 8:30 in the morning till 5:30 in the evening or whatever it might be, where you could measure labor time in blocks. Then a minimum wage is, yes, I can establish a minimum wage and so on. If you adjust the minimum wage, it will be inducing an appearance of having an effect, as it has in this country. But what actually happens is that it encourages certain range of firms to outsource, to increase the number of part-time workers. So you become a part-time worker, you're paid part-time with a good minimum wage, but you're actually expected to work full-time. And that, many people in the Precariat know exactly what I'm talking about, and they've written to me and I've documented it in the book that has been a big factor. So you've had a huge increase in this country and in other countries of so-called self-employment, which is actually outsourcing and getting people into insecure where they're not covered effectively by a minimum wage.
Remaining on the political side, in many articles you argue that the precariat and in general the weak in our societies are sources of votes for populist candidates. Why do you think the political demands of the precariat have been so far intercepted by the populists rather than by the left?
In the book, The Precariat, the New Dangerous Class, on page 1, I said, unless the insecurities of the precariat are addressed as a matter of urgency, we will see the emergence of a political monster. And you will not be surprised that since November 2016, many people have written to me and said, your monster has arrived. And I think one really has to look at the precariat as a huge number of people that are internally divided. This is something I developed in the second book on the precariat. The first group I call atavists. These are the people who feel they've lost a past. Their parents or themselves had full-time jobs in manufacturing. They were unionized and they had the benefits of being in the proletariat. They don't get that themselves. They feel insecure and they would look backwards because they don't have a lot of education. That's the group that has supported Trump, Brexit, Marine Le Pen, Orban in Hungary. The second group in the precariat, you alluded to this earlier, consists of what I call nostalgic, made up mainly of migrants, ethnic minorities, disabled, people who feel they have no sense of home. The first group feel they've lost a past. The second group feel they've lost a present. They don't have a home anywhere. Now this group will not be supporting populists, but they tend to be detached, right? But they're looking for the possibility of re-engaging. It's the third group. Maybe you will be joining that group, right? And others in the room. Exactly.
It's likely.
It's the third group. And you've got to empathize, if not join it. The third group I call progressives. These are people who was going to university, going to college, and they were promised a future, a career, occupational trajectory, security. And they come out of university, millions now, with debt, with the prospect of moving in and out of jobs and not knowing which way they're going, and facing insecurity, not able to form secure relationships because they can't have the security. And this group, of course, is not going to support the Trumps or the Marine Le Pens. They're looking for a new politics of paradise. And my only message really is, don't get cynical, don't feel we can't do anything about it, and don't get sucked into the money-making business orientation. We can do better than that. And I think the previous generation of economists failed that test.
It's on our shoulder. One last question, Professor, regarding your recent experience at Davos. You have been there twice in the last few years. It is a summit of great leaders who could bring about the change you're urging. What was the reaction to your ideas there?
Well, I'm delighted in a strange sort of way that across the spectrum, including billionaires, trade union leaders, social activists, people on the left and right, are becoming more open to the idea of a basic income. I think it should be something that will be a part of the mainstream debate. I think we can afford it. I think it's the necessary step to building a new income distribution system. It's not a panacea. It's not something that is going to be easily introduced, but without a doubt, in my mind, and I hope the book shows that, the new book, the basic income is becoming a political imperative. It's becoming an imperative as we face automation and the robots and everything, which is going to make inequalities much greater. And it's an imperative to address the insecurities of the precariat. No other instrument on the table today can do that.